Meantime, Trump was allowed out of the courtroom for just a couple of days, because that's what happens. The only time he can campaign is effectively on the weekends. He was in New Jersey, a state where the Republicans almost won the governorship, but essentially Republicans don't win there. It's a blue state, but apparently 100,000 people turned up. 100,000 people turned up to see Trump. And of course, they were particularly fired up about his experiences that he's been having in that courtroom in New York, a courtroom that, of course, is supposed to be about paperwork, but it's been so much about a whole bunch of other garbage. But anyway, here's what the crowd think of what's happening to Trump in the courtroom just across the river. Meantime, last week, the media was excited about every little detail that Stormy Daniels had to say. Now, remember, the case against him is not did he or did he not sleep with Stormy Daniels. That's irrelevant. The case against him is about whether the non-disclosure agreement, the hush money, which is not illegal either, not that it was made or not whether she was happy with it or not, but about how it was accounted for in the books of the Trump organisation. And surprisingly, a person who hates Trump with every fibre of his being, who has seen the reality that Biden is too old but will still vote for him because he ain't Donald Trump, comedian Bill Maher, was one of the very few on the left to actually point out that last week was not as good as lefties thought it was. For all of the salacious and silly information that they got, it didn't actually move the ball forward on the paperwork case.
But you say it's not a Me Too case.
It is not a Me Too case. I mean, I wasn't assaulted. I wasn't attacked or raped or coerced or blackmailed. They tried to shove me in the Me Too box to further their own agenda. And first of all, I didn't want any part of that because it's not the truth, and I'm not a victim in that regard.
That's not what she's saying now. She's talking about he was bigger and blocking the way. It's all the Me Too buzzwords. She said there was a power imbalance of power, for sure. My hands were shaking so hard. She said she blacked out. Blacked out? She's a porn star.
So that's the point, is that the defence's ability to come back against her is to say, well, hang on, she said this, she said this, she said this, now she's saying this, she's saying this, she's saying this. If you're sitting around in a jury, well, then it makes you go, oh, yeah, probably, okay, wipe what she had to say, back to the paperwork. But because all of the paperwork stuff happened before Stormy Daniels turns up, what's the most recent thing you think about before you go into the jury room? Now, again, it's New York. They'll most likely find him guilty. But if it was anywhere else, he'd be 100% correct that the salacious stuff from Stormy Daniels in the past few days was very different than what she was saying. This was after she'd apparently slept with Trump, after he became the president. And you can see that if the story gets changed when you're in a courtroom versus what you're willing to say when you're not under oath, it may well end up working in the former president's favour. Anyway, we'll all wait and see. His former lawyer, Michael Cohen, is going to be first up on Monday in the United States, and the media will, of course, go nuts. And one other thing, just about the overall coverage. If, like me, in Australia, you're sitting up in the middle of the night, you're watching how granular this thing goes, hour by hour, witness by witness. Every TV channel that's talking about this only talks to prosecutors to help interpret what's happening inside the courtroom. Now, I understand that they all hate Trump. They all want him to be found guilty. They'd all love him to go to jail because if he goes to jail, fingers crossed, he doesn't become president. But you've got to have defence attorneys somewhere on television explaining what the potential response to the prosecution case is. Otherwise, you're just getting a version of state TV with a whole bunch of people absolutely agreeing with what the prosecution, who of course represents the government, in this case the state of New York, is saying. So I understand Trump derangement syndrome means they think they should only cover it in one way. But justice is supposed to be blind, and therefore you're allowed to hear from defence analysts on television, not just the people who say he's guilty, he's always been guilty, and today nothing changed.